focus is always, of course, humanitarian response, which is much needed. And our argument at Upwardly Global is that we can also, in parallel, be helping people to find a way to survive and a way to thrive. And we know that's what people are doing early on. And I know, for example, there were several of our volunteers at UpGlow who were at the Dulles airport welcoming Afghan new arrivals. And when they had learned that somebody was a professional in their background, said, oh, you should register with Upwardly Global. And the response oftentimes was, oh, we already have. We're already registered even before they've gotten off that flight. And that's because people are looking for, how do we ensure that we can be included and sustain ourselves as we move forward in our new home country. And so because of that, we're really excited to say that we won honorable mention in the Fast Company's 100 Changing Ideas for the World, which was really an award for our response to the Afghan crisis and how we were able to mobilize quickly and really help people find employment in the early days. So we're very proud of our ability to demonstrate that model. And that's a model that we have then replicated on Ukraine response, including in Poland, where we are currently working with over 400 Ukrainian refugees, largely women. And now we're looking at what that means for us around the southern border. We have in the past 2 years, about 3,000 applications from asylum seekers from Latin America into our program. The third largest group that we are serving are Venezuelans. The first are Afghans and Ukrainians. And 60% of those that we have served in this last year in 2022 were people who are forcefully displaced. So this is a trend that we're seeing at Upwardly Global, but we're also seeing our ability to position ourselves as a solution in the early days is really helping us integrate well into the ecosystem, including with partners like Welcome.us, who we're excited to have on this call. And with that, I think I wanted just to share a little bit of sort of a background of what we've achieved this past year. And I think Doris will share her slides. I think there are slides for this section. 2 slides. And this is just really to talk about our overall impact that we've had. So in the course of UpGlow's history, we've transformed the lives of over 13,460 people, and we've helped place 9,000. So we will achieve the 10,000 mark this year, hands down. And if you go to the next slide, and then in 2002, we were able to help 1,116 job seekers get placed. That's not the overall impact of the people we serve. We also serve a large number who get reskilled and upskilled with an average salary of $66,000 and a real economic impact. And the reason this is important is because one of the biggest stories at UpGlow is that we know that immigrants and refugees contribute to our local economies and that they have a real positive impact in our economies and in our communities. And that as we're looking at labor shortages, that will be the new norm for us, how we can really set people up for success and how we can ensure we have differentiated services for individuals that are coming into the United States that doesn't relegate everybody to that first and entry-level job, but distinguishes the fact that some are ready to start at the mid or the high skill level. So with that, I will now pass it on to my colleague, Lourena.
Thank you, Jina. Hello, everyone. My name is Lourena Boy, and I'm the Program Director for Upwardly Global's New York region. I joined Upwardly Global last September on the day my son turned 3 months old, and today we're actually celebrating his first birthday. Outside of Upwardly Global, I am the board chair for Refugee Congress's Board of Directors. I sit on Refugee Council USA's board and also recently appointed on the advisory board to the UNHCR task team on engagement and partnership with organizations led by displaced and stateless persons. I'm honored to be joining you all today as the moderator for this all-important panel in advance of World Refugee Day, which is on June 20th. Being a former refugee from Liberia, West Africa, I oftentimes sit and reflect upon who I would have been if I wasn't afforded the opportunity to be resettled in the US. For those who may not know, Liberia went through 2 brutal civil wars. After constant harassment from government soldiers and rebels, my mother made the brave decision to flee from Liberia to the Ivory Coast in the middle of the night on a cargo train with 6 of my 7 siblings and I. My father had previously traveled to the US for a pastoral conference, leaving us behind. Fortunately for us, we were later able to be resettled in the US and join him. If you ask me why this work is so near and dear to my heart, I reflect upon my story and think of the many lives that were lost during the war in Liberia and those who are waiting a happy ending to their own stories across the world. I am grateful that countries such as the US continue to welcome new Americans, and most recently through organizations such as Welcome.US. And for organizations such as Upperly Global, which ensures the economic inclusion of refugees in the US. Although it might either be morning or afternoon where you are, I want to set the stage for this conversation as if we're at a dinner table. I also want to ground us in the fact that there are currently 103 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, of which 32.5 million are refugees. And of that number, less than 1% get resettled yearly. So at this dinner table, we will hear from Welcome.US, who mobilizes Americans to welcome and support those seeking refuge here, from Upperly Global, who's working to eliminate employment barriers for internationally educated refugees, and from an Upperly Global alumni who will speak to how she was supported along her journey. At this time, I want to turn the mic over to our panelists to introduce themselves before we move into questions. I know you already heard from Jina, but I'll start from Jina to make her official introduction.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jina. I'm the CEO of Upwardly Global. Thanks for joining us.
Next, we'll hear from Nazanin Ash of Welcome.US.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to join for this panel today, especially to join the amazing women on this panel, whom I've had the privilege of working with for much of the past decade. And I'm such huge admirers of your work, Lourena, and yours, Jina, Sohaila. So excited to share this space with you today. I'm Nazanin. I'm honored to lead an organization called Welcome.US. We mobilize and empower Americans and a broader range of amazing organizations like Upwardly Global to help welcome and resettle newcomers to the United States and ensure that they thrive. And as Lourena mentioned, we've taken on a particular mission with respect to expanding opportunities for newcomers to arrive to the United States through sponsorship. Thanks so much. Over to you, Sohaila.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sohaila Kakar, and I'm from Afghanistan. Back home, I hold 2 degrees, like MD degree from Afghanistan and a master degree from Malaysia. I used to work as a general surgeon. I perform a lot of surgeries. Even I participated in brain surgeries. And I was assistant professor at American University. So like surgery is a department for male. And I was the only female in the whole department. Like female goes only for gynae and OB. So like it was a privilege for me to be part of a surgery department. In 2021, when Taliban retook the country, so the condition for women was so bad, and like they don't allow women to get education and to work. So as we were the girls at our home were breadwinner of the house. So my family decided to like leave Afghanistan, and including my family, I ended up in New Jersey, USA in 2021. And everyone was so scared that how we will survive, how to live in America because the standards are so different from our country and US. So in search of job, here where I found Upwardly Global. And Upwardly Global helped me a lot to many stuff they gave me. They provided me job coach by the name of, her name is Summer. She's a wonderful lady. She helped me how to write like US style resume. She provided a lot of mock interviews before each of my interview. She provided me a lot of links for different job opportunities. And everything, like I learned a lot from her. And in 2022, I got my job where I'm working currently, which is with New York Presbyterian Hospital. And I work as a data research coordinator there. I love my job. It's like a wonderful organization to work with. I'm learning a lot. Everyone is so supportive. My manager is so, like, she helps me a lot. I know I have a lot of issues, so she helps me a lot and I'm learning a lot. But for my long-term goals, I would love to go for my USMLE exam, which is board exam, and work as a physician here in US. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sohaila. Once again, it's really a pleasure to be sharing the stage with you ladies so that we can have this dinner style conversation. So at this time, I will transition into a few questions that I would like to pose to each of you. And I'll start with Sohaila. So Sohaila, you've had an incredible professional journey in Afghanistan. Why do you think it was hard for someone who was educated, English speaking, and a refugee to find work here in the US?
So based off my experience, like I was lucky enough to have Upwardly Global and they helped me a lot find a job. But those siblings of mine who didn't register, like we came 7 sisters and a brother here. So those who didn't register with Upwardly Global, it was so struggling for them. Like they were like overqualified for some of my interviews too. I applied for many jobs, like around 35 jobs, and 10 of them told me that you are all overqualified. And because I didn't know like my skill will be valued here, I applied for low skill like entry level jobs. So most of them rejected me because they said you're overqualified, and I believe that the standards are different. So like we don't recognize it earlier. So it's a big like challenge for everyone. Also, except for the overqualification, language barriers. I had my English, but my siblings does not, like they cannot speak really well English. So it's another like challenge for them. And in addition to that, other struggle, there were many struggles. I lost my words, sorry about that.
I can jump into Sohaila, and I just want people to know Sohaila is actually the breadwinner for her entire family. So not only her sisters, but her mom and her dad, because they have medical conditions. And so it's also really impressive. I remember, Sohaila, when you got accepted to NYP and they asked for all this paperwork and you're like, oh my gosh, it's too much, I can't handle it. And just recognizing that a lot of times people don't know what the process is, and that can create its own anxiety and the fear that you actually haven't gotten the job because they keep asking for more and more and more things. And the fact that it is overwhelming when you're trying to survive and help get your parents the medical support that they need and help get your siblings registered in schools. And at the same time, you're looking for work. And especially for our Afghan community, they're come in very large families. So I just want to acknowledge that when we talk about mental health, it's a real challenge and a roadblock for our community. And then I would add, the career navigation that you mentioned, Sohaila, is so typical. Like, where do I start? What am I qualified for? Do I need to relicense or recredential? And in the United States, 85% of jobs are secured through social networks. So if you don't have a social network, it's really difficult to get your foot in the door, so to speak, and get your resume and your CV seen. And I just have to say, for Sohaila in particular, you know, the medical industry is a very regulated industry. And I remember asking you, so do you want to go back into medicine? Like, do you want to go back and become a doctor? And you were like, no, it will take too long and it will cost too much money. And I don't want to make that investment here. And that's a real loss. But at the same time, I'm thrilled that you're still working in the medical field. So, yeah. Did you want to add anything else, Sohaila, now that you've had a chance to think?
Thank you so much, Gina. So I just wanted to add, I forgot this wording that like everyone, like those who like they know, they trust, and like recommendations, everyone here prefers recommendations. So if I didn't have any recommendation, I believe I wouldn't have gotten this job. I'm here. Like it was Upwardly Global who helped me achieve, like get this job. And also like the you talked about the time. It's time consuming. Like it took me 7 months to get the job. Even like Upwardly Global was helping me, but like for some people it might be not a long duration, but for me, because like we were sponsored and like we were feeling so bad that we are burden on the government, and like it is also a challenge that it takes too long to get a job here in the US, even we knew English.
Yeah, I totally hear that, Sohaila. And one of the key things that you mentioned is that, you know, having that network, right? It sounds like, you know, through Upwardly Global, you found that network, and I'm sure also in your community, right? Because once one gets that sort of like sense of welcome, that really helps them to connect with the right people and right organizations to ultimately be able to help them with their journeys. And I think, and I want to tie that into, so just thinking about the sponsorship program, and anyone can answer this question. Why is the sponsorship program such a critical innovation in how the US welcomes refugees?
I'm happy to start us off on that question. I think there's a number of ways to answer it. First and foremost, because we need more national capacity to welcome and resettle refugee newcomers here to the United States, because even as Lourena, you mentioned at the outset, refugee populations have grown exponentially over the last 3 decades as a result of, you know, longstanding conflicts that have been difficult to resolve, and increasingly as a result of what we often refer to as the never-ending natural disaster that is climate change. You know, wealthy nations have really struggled to meet their humanitarian obligations and to expand humanitarian pathways so that more people can find safety and refuge and opportunity. And you know, those limitations have really been constrained by the capacity of government, right? So if you're looking at traditional refugee resettlement systems, you're relying on tax dollars, public dollars. We know that there is tremendous competition and need for government funding. And so we can expect that, you know, for example, in the US, that the Congress would double or triple or quadruple congressional appropriations for refugee resettlement, even though the need is growing so greatly. I think one of the most amazing things that's happened over the last really 1.5 years is because of the twin crises of Afghanistan and then Ukraine, the US government really took action to innovate and to accelerate innovations, especially in sponsorship, you know, piloting it first for Afghans and then expanding it to Ukrainians after Russia invaded Ukraine, and then expanding it to populations from the Western Hemisphere, Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, and now through the Welcome Corps, through the State Department, making sponsorship a pathway that refugees around the world from global crises can access. And fundamentally what this means is that we are tapping into the capacity of our communities, our diaspora communities, our broad civic and national service organizations, hundreds of private sponsorship and civic organizations. You're tapping into their capacity and their willingness to help welcome and resettle refugee newcomers. And it is vastly expanding our national capacity to welcome. I think some of the most startling statistics I can provide is just looking at the Ukrainian and Western Hemisphere programs. Over 350,000 people in need of safety have now arrived through these programs, and over 1.5 million applications have been filed by Americans looking to sponsor their loved ones or others in need of safety. And it's a tremendous statement to what our American communities are willing and able to do. And it's amazing that the Biden administration has created these innovations to allow them to participate.
Absolutely. Innovation indeed. Reminds me when I used to work in resettlement, I cannot tell you how many churches, synagogues, community groups who are just so interested in, welcoming newcomers, and the fact that now they're being given this opportunity to mobilize themselves and to be able to, add on to what the U.S. or where the U.S. government might fall short. So it's really interesting to see how this innovation is playing out. And then just to add on to that question about sponsorship, how do you think the sponsorship program can be a solution to support asylum seekers coming through the safe mobility offices as well?
Right. Well, given the success of the sponsorship pathways and what are, again, diverse American communities, and I'm often careful to say that I use American to mean all of our communities, all of us who are living here, because it's been led first and foremost by our diaspora communities who finally see an expanded opportunity to be able to bring their loved ones to safety. So I see the programs that are launching out of the Safe Mobility offices in the Western Hemisphere as yet another expansion of these sponsorship pathways. So newcomers in need of safety will be processed in the region, which means they won't have to take dangerous journeys. And it also means that if they're eligible for the Refugee Resettlement Program, they can come through that pathway. And if not, they have multiple other pathways through family or other forms of sponsorship and parole to be able to come to safety here. And to go back to your first question about sponsorship, Lourena, and the way I think it relates to Sohaila's experience and what Jina is describing about the importance of that facilitation. One of the unique attributes of sponsorship is it means you have almost a one-one relationship with your caseworker, if you will, right? It's a community that's wrapping around you for the long term to help facilitate your sense of inclusion and belonging in a new country, in a new community. It's a ready-made group of friends, but they're also your guides to your new community, your new country, helping you register for public benefits you're eligible for, sign up for English language classes if necessary, identify recertification pathways you may be eligible for, facilitate finding employment, using their networks, using their recommendations. So it just allows newcomers to tap into a wealth of community resources that can both meet their technical needs for housing and employment and other forms of assistance, but also, again, to provide that new community of friends, the social capital, the inclusion and belonging that is often as essential to their success here in the United States.
And I just want to add some context, Naz, to what you've been saying. I mean, historically, refugees who come to the United States, it's the most vetted process to get into the United States. It typically takes 2 years in order to get into the United States. And the highest quota we've ever had was 100,000 under the Obama administration. And so the fact that for just Ukrainians, we've allowed in 350,000, and we've done that in a period of a year is tremendous in terms of our ability to welcome more people to safety quicker than we ever have before. And so I just wanted to give people context in terms of how impactful this has been as sort of a tool in our toolbox to be able to leverage. And the fact that now it's being extended to Haitians, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, and Cubans, many of whom would be processed through, these offices in Colombia and somewhere else. Naz, jump in.
Guatemala, initially Colombia and Guatemala, but also to be expanded to other countries in the region.
Just provides an example of how this administration is thinking creatively about how do we create more legal pathways for people to get in. And I think from Upwardly Global's perspective, it's then how do we ensure that we create pathways for them to be able to stay in a sustainable way. The Afghan Adjustment Act is something we're all advocating for that would allow Afghans to be able to be on a quicker pathway to permanent residency versus having to renew their humanitarian parole visas every 2 years or go through the long process of applying for asylum, which we've documented in a report recently would actually cost us $74 million more than if we just passed the Afghan Adjustment Act. But it's also about how do we set people up for success in workforce inclusion. And I'm going to put a plug in, which is we did create a portal for Ukrainians coming into the country, and on the portal also includes sponsors. And how do we equip sponsors to better able navigate if they have somebody that they're sponsoring that is a professional, what kinds of tools are available for them in order to seek employment so that they don't get stuck either being told they're overqualified or then just having to take a low-wage job and settle with that. And so we think at Upwardly Global, it's a real opportunity for innovation as well.
And there are some key themes that I'm hearing, and I wanted to highlight. As I hear each of you respond, I'm hearing a recurring theme of safe and legal pathways and family reunification and really safety, which is the key word. How do we get people here quickly, safely, in order to make sure that they're either being reunified with their family or they're given a pathway or a runway to be able to be included in the economy to thrive, right? Because ultimately we want these individuals to thrive. And, the crisis of forcibly displaced people continues to rise. And I can remember back when I used to work in resettlement back in 2016, the number at that time of forcibly displaced people was around 83 million. And now we're up to 103 million, and that number continues to rise. So it's really interesting to continue to hear about these innovative pathways. So in the chat, my colleague Nicholas mentioned that we are open to hearing from you all. At this time, we're welcoming you all in the audience to this dinner table. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, please feel free to tap your fork in your glass and ask away. We'll be more than happy to take some questions as well. And feel free to place those questions in the chat.
Naz, what do you think is the biggest challenge to expanding the sponsorship program? Because you said like 1 point something million, and
right,
there's a lot of people we could be matching to right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, importantly, those 1.5 million applications represent people who are already matched. So those are sponsorship applications that have been submitted by sponsors on behalf of beneficiaries that they are sponsoring. So I would say that the most significant constraint to expanding sponsorship are the caps that the Biden administration has placed on the program. So 1.5 million applications for the program serving Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. Meanwhile, that program is capped at 30,000 approvals a month. 360,000 for the year. So there's an opportunity for the Biden administration to raise the cap and allow for many more of those applications to be considered and approved. And then I think continuing to expand both population eligibility and processing for sponsorship. I mean, it is proving to be a very viable and successful pathway, again, for welcoming many more. As I mentioned, over 350,000 who have arrived through this pathway just over the last year. since the launch of these sponsorship programs. And as Lourena put into context with us, that's against a refugee resettlement program that on average, over the last 3 decades, has really only had the capacity to admit 70,000 refugees a year. So in a single year, you see American communities increasing that number by orders of magnitude because they were given the opportunity.
Naz, sorry to put you on the spot here, but so I've heard some people, they sometimes think that with the sponsorship program, it might be kind of like overshadowing resettlement. What would you say? Because, one of my remarks is that this is something that's complementary, right? So can you speak towards that? What is your response to those who think that, sponsorship might be kind of like outdoing or taking away resettlement?
Well, I agree with you, Lourena, that I see this as absolutely complementary. And it's a way of tapping into private resources, private capacity, a huge desire from our communities and a wide variety of organizations, as you mentioned, to participate in welcoming work. And I see it as only additive. And as people and organizations who are humanitarians and committed to bringing ever more people to safety, both because it has huge impact for them. And as Jina and you and Sohaila described, tremendous benefit to our communities and to our nation. We're so lucky to be a nation that welcomes newcomers and is able to benefit from their extraordinary contributions. So it feels like a win-win all around to think expansively about how we can welcome many more. I think the other thing I would add is that there's always going to be a need for the really important specialized expertise of resettlement agencies. I think about people who may arrive who are victims of torture or gender-based violence. I think about elderly couples who may arrive who are beyond working age. I think about families who may be arriving with medical conditions, children with significant medical needs. This is where the expertise of our resettlement agencies, the social workers, the case managers that they have on staff can provide, very necessary and integrated and deep support for individuals and families who may arrive with unique needs. But for many others, the experience of being newcomers in the United States is not unlike what so many of our families experienced at one point in time. You arrive with a proverbial $100 or $10 or no dollars in your pocket, and with the support and the guidance of your new community, you make it. And you make it as an individual, you have generational impact, and you make a huge contribution to your new country. So I only see the wins.
And I would add to that, 83% of growth in the US economy is coming from immigrants and the children of immigrants. And, because of legislation from past administrations, we've actually decreased the number of immigrants and refugees who have been in the country. And so we're at a deficit right now in terms of the labor that we need for the US economy to continue to grow. And not in an extractive way, but just to say, as we're thinking of being a country of welcome, and we are a country of welcome, we also know that this is a win that creates shared prosperity for all of us, and really debunks the myth that, people are taking jobs because they're not taking jobs. Right now, for every unemployed person, there are 2 jobs in the open market. So I think, as the United States becomes the leading edge of how do we do workforce inclusion for newcomers, we're best placed as a country to be competitive.
Thanks for sharing that, Jina. And that's a great segue into a question for Sohaila. So Sohaila, just wanting you to kind of explain your experience a little bit more in depth in terms of how would you describe your journey working with your Upperly Global coach? What sorts of supports did you receive, and what sorts of resources were you provided? Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Sure. Thank you so much. So when we came here, it was like so difficult. There was a big psychological trauma. Like mentally, you are not that relaxed, and you cannot trust. Building the relationship is like so difficult for someone who is from other country, and you don't know how like other will think about you. Like you feel we are from a place where like you feel if you are like you're not a good person if you are in bad condition, it's because of your own self. So like if I'm here, so I cannot trust other and share my bad side, like the stories, like why our people are doing this to their own people. Like it's so hard to discuss with others. But Jean then sorry so Tamara used to like provide me that support. She like it was not only a job coach, she was my mentor by many ways. Like she helped me a lot through a lot of stuff. She provided me the support that I was not expecting from someone who is my job coach. Like she provided me mental support. For that was the main thing, except the job side. Like she provided me extra support. She used to take even two sessions with me per week, even though more than that, whenever I used to ask her that how do we do that, so she like provided me the whole class of 1 hour. 1 hour is a big time, so talk about many stuff and make me feel relaxed. The second thing that she discussed with me and I learned a lot, my resume was like 8-9 pages, and she made it 1 page, like US style resume. She removed a lot of stuff, and like now when I look at my previous resume and the new one, the 7 pages was not that beneficial, but the 1 page, like that reflects real me, is the most like beneficial. I believe it's a big part, like how I learn. It's not important to be more, it's important to be concise and so you're reflecting stuff. So that's another. In addition to that, we had a lot of mock interviews. I didn't know how to talk. Like back home, we don't talk. Women don't talk. It's only men who like are allowed to talk about themselves. So she taught me how to like talk, how to express myself, how to like shine, how to be the elevator of that the table. So like how you can do all those stuff. She taught me those before an interview, during the interview, after when you have a job offer, how to negotiate about that. Like she taught me everything US style, and meanwhile she did a lot of like many links. She used to send me a lot of emails and do this, apply for this job, and apply it for many. Like I think, if I'm not mistaken, more than 30 jobs. And the links were provided by her, and it was so helpful. And like I cannot feel more privileged to be like with Tamar from Upperly Global, like mentally, physically, financially, everything was like so good. Yeah.
Sohaila, so it's such a pleasure to really hear that, because, and just going back to the point that Jina made, there's this myth that sometimes people think that, you know, refugees come here and they're wanting handouts, but it sounds like you already have the skills and capabilities in you, and all you really needed was just a hand up. And it sounds like that's what your coach Tamar provided for you. So we have one question that was posed for Naz. And Naz, as you're answering this question, I want to center it around closing remarks from each of you. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting full. This conversation definitely has me full. So I think this dinner is actually coming to an end. But I will let me pose that question for you, Naz. How would you say, or how can public-private partnerships help move the needle on impact?
Wow. Well, I think organizations like ours and Uprooted Global are demonstrating that every day, right? So I think about the unique partnerships that Upwardly Global has with the private sector and what that has meant for creating pathways for newcomers to find jobs that match the contributions and more that they're able to make. For the work of Welcome.us and for the work of sponsorship overall, those public-private partnerships have been essential. So, if I think about the matching platform that we've created to help match beneficiaries who don't have a sponsor with sponsors who are eager to be a bridge to safety for those who need it, that's something that was built for us by Goldman Sachs and ServiceNow and Infosys engineers. And amazingly, the engineers who worked on the platform, the lead engineers, one was a Ukrainian-American refugee, the other a Russian-American refugee, both resettled to the United States through refugee resettlement agencies in the 1990s. And with a keen eye for, the need for people to find sponsors and a keen eye for the protection that refugees need to be afforded in the sponsorship process, they built us an amazing technology platform in a matter of weeks that I think would have taken us months, if not years, to be built in sort of traditional government systems. And then in addition to that, just looking at the Afghan response, the Ukrainian response, we've seen a tremendous outpouring of support and a desire to participate from corporations, from national and civic service organizations, from hundreds of community-based and faith organizations. At Welcome, we run a Welcome Fund and
sounds like Naz might be frozen. Okay, so in the meantime, Sohaila, would you like to make any closing remarks? And then after that, I'll transition it back over to Jina.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Upwardly Global, for all the efforts they're doing. And I hope Upwardly grow more and more and more, and they support more immigrants. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sorry to have lost Naz, but if she comes back, we should let her finish her remarks. Yeah, no, thanks everybody. And I think, this was, so I hope what you're taking away from this conversation is that the sponsorship model is a real innovation in terms of how many and how quickly we can help people seeking safety to come into the country. And Upwardly Global is then that next part of the solution, which is then how do we ensure that they're integrated well into the workforce? It's one thing to let people in, and then it's another thing to make sure that they're set up for success. And we really see sponsors as a critical part of that, and really know that they need also the resources in order to help people in the right direction for their careers. I want to say that some of you might be really pumped about what you've heard here today and thinking about, well, what can I specifically do? And so one thing is the Afghan Adjustment Act, which I mentioned, it needs more support and encouragement to pass the Congress. And you can visit the site Evacuate Our Allies page, which maybe someone will put up in the chat as ways to take action. And then the second is we have launched the Honoring Our Immigrant Heritage campaign, which is designed to raise vital funds as we support refugees back into their professional careers. And I would say, you heard me say already that we've seen a huge uptick in refugees or forcibly displaced persons coming to Upglow. And so we really see this as an opportunity to ensure that we're continuing to allow them to thrive. With that, I will just thank everybody for their participation and for all your time. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Ciao, ciao.